So while he's setting that up, I would make a comment, and that is, I think maybe we need to huddle up after this call and see if it's feasible to get the whole team using Ring every day, so that not only in addition to having an account you could use to show a client, you also, I think it's established that if you're using something every day, you get to be more familiar with it and better able to talk about it in a sales setting. So that's just a comment while you're setting up your slides, Felipe.
Sure.
Yeah. Yep.
Perfect. All right, so actually, we wanted to cover the same agenda as I prepared. So one of the sort of different portions that I wanted to cover today were the actual technical requirements for service. So one of the questions that we'd had in our past sessions are what kinds of technical requirements are there for the use of the service? Will it work within the infrastructure for the particular country or region in which the product is being sold? Um, can it be used on a mobile device? Can it be used in conjunction with voice over IP equipment such as an ATA or a voice over IP telephone? How does that all work? How to, as Christian said, we will be issuing test accounts for everyone later on in the day. Now that I've received all the information, I have requested all of those accounts be created. And we'll go through a brief demo on how to log into the account and um, essentially what you should be exploring. And by all means, explore the accounts. There's nothing in there that you can break. When I do some, I don't do it as often anymore, but when I do train customers, I encourage them to make setting changes, try creating new departments, new menus, new call flows. This is not like a traditional PBX. You're not going to break something. The hardware is not going to be, in your closet, a brick. You can always reset all the systems to default, contact our customer support center either by voice or by sending an email. We will, if you can't figure it out, set it up to its demo settings so that you can continue. There's not really a way that you can break anything. And then afterwards, I'd like to show you the agent portal. So how do we access the support materials, the marketing collateral, and finally place an order? And then time permitting, Matt was going to, if not demo and show, at least talk a little bit about the country landing pages that he's created. So what are the technical requirements for using Ring by Name? Well, as a voice over IP product, if it's going to be installed at a physical location, so whether it's an ATA or a Grandstream, a Yealink, or a Cisco SPA phone, a Linksys, the service does require a broadband internet service requirement. Here in the United States, even though there is a high penetration rate of broadband services, we still get customers who, despite our marketing and talking to our salespeople, still have that sort of layer of confusion where they assume that because it's a telephone service, it's going to be riding on the copper cable that their telephone currently runs on. This is a voice over IP product, so it does require broadband internet services. We have customers who use it with as little as a 1.5 megabyte T1 line. And even at 1.5 megabytes, that does support 10 lines. So a very slow DSL connection rather will work. The customer should also have, either from their internet service provider or provided by themselves or their IT consultant, a router that is reasonably up to date and has a few minimum requirements. One, it should have a firewall or a mechanism by which we can open up certain ports in the firewall in order to allow for our services to operate and flow through that security feature of the device. And if it is a product that is provided by the internet service provider, as we mentioned last week, there are certain internet service providers or the local incumbent telephone company, which sometimes provides the internet to the customer, will do things like block voice traffic that is not on their network or starting from going through their network. This is typically referred to as SIP ALG. So the application layer gateway. So essentially, this is a setting within the typically the combination router modem that's provided by the ISP that blocks all voice traffic that doesn't start or within that device or travel through their own network. So when we go through these, we do ask the customer to check those settings. Second, if it is being connected to a device, a voice over IP device, that device has to be a SIP device, so a session initiated protocol device. So it will not work with things like a Panasonic TDE 300 hybrid VoIP phone. Or an Avaya Lucent phone, for example, or Nortel or Mitel phones. Those are all phones that in their marketing are billed as IP phones. And typically what that means is they can be connected through the network back to the PBX in the closet, but they cannot be connected to a service provider. They essentially use IP to connect themselves back to that PBX or that key system in that telephone closet. So any SIP compliant device, so those would be your Grandstreams, your Yealinks, UT Starcom, Cisco, Linksys, Fanville, all of those sort of names that we recognize, whether they're IP desk phones, Wi-Fi phones of a certain type, capable of like 802.11n or AC. Gigabit speed is generally a good indicator for those Wi-Fi phones, or something like an ATA, something that's going to take that connection through the VoIP and convert it back into an analog signal that can be connected directly to, let's say, a cordless phone inside the customer's office. And then in terms of bandwidth, we're looking at 70 kilobits per second per concurrent audio stream. So for every person that's on the phone, we're going to be utilizing 70 kilobits per, of bandwidth during that phone call. Now, you'll notice I don't say here 70 kilobits per minute because it all depends on how long, and really you're only utilizing that bandwidth during that active telephone call. If only one person is on the phone speaking, one active phone call is only 70 kilobits. If it's two, you're looking at 140 kilobits of continuous bandwidth utilization. So when you do your calculations, we actually take into account how many active phone calls that customer is going to be making. And that becomes part of sort of the checklist of questions that we have in talking to our customer, and we'll go through those as well. So the first thing I want to do here is actually flip over to the page that's on screen. It's the support website, and for those of you that haven't already logged into our support application, our website support.ringbyname.com. We actually have a list of, in the getting ready to install section, a list of requirements and suggestions for what our customer should have and some of the initial planning any and or all customers should sort of do before they begin the process of implementing any sort of VoIP implementation. So the first thing we want to do is talk about the bandwidth. And again, how do we go about measuring the bandwidth a customer has? In most cases, our customer will say, yes, we absolutely have broadband internet access. How many customers will offhand know the speed of that connection? Well, from experience, we can tell you it's actually a very small number. It's less than 40% of them know the exact speed that they have. They don't really have a good count of how many devices are online. Now, remember that with the sort of saturation of Wi-Fi devices, corporate Wi-Fi, laptops, iPhones, Android devices, all of those are sort of competing for space and bandwidth on the network. So the first thing we suggest is the universal speed test, right? So you can go to the Ookla site, you can go through speedtest.net. The local internet service provider may have a speed test on their own. The first thing you're going to want to do is run a speed test so that you can determine what sort of downstream and upstream the customer has. So simply navigate to any one of those. And for those of you that haven't done it already, it's basically a site that allows you to run a quick test. It's all Java based. There's nothing to download or install. All this is going to do is it's going to test the response time from the customer's network to a centralized testing point, and then download a test file and then send it back to the server so that we can get a comparison as to what that speed the customer has. So you'll see here that the current connection that I'm on is a pretty stable internet business connection here. So my downloads are somewhere in the 90-90 range, right? So it looks like I've got 85 megabytes down and 93 megabytes up. So this, to me, would indicate, for those of you that can't see that, indicate that, one, we've got a very slow, low ping. So within 14 milliseconds, I can go from my computer to the download or the testing service, which typically this system would check the point nearest to the location, the access point, and it'll give me an idea of what those speeds are, right? Anything below 1.5 megabytes per second, I would automatically recommend to the customer, Mr. Customer, you have less than a stable broadband speed, so maybe the customer has what's called not a DSL, but an ADSL. So you're looking at maybe 768K down and 350K up. These are the old, the first version of DSL broadband services that followed the ISDN private network connections. Or this is a customer that is way, way, way out at the very end of the serviceable range of the copper line infrastructure. And for those customers, we typically recommend that they look into an upgrade, right? Whether that is a new broadband provider in the area, maybe they've got fiber, maybe they have a cable company that can provide them a better, more stable internet connection, or sometimes we will even recommend a wireless solution, something like a microwave point-to-point or a WiMAX, something that's broadcast from a tower. What we do know will not work, absolutely, positively will not work, and something to keep in mind, is satellite-based internet. The problem with satellite-based internet is that there is too much latency. And what do I mean by that? The response time from your send to your receive, your response back from the server, is way too long. So the for those of you, without getting too technical, the time that the signal takes to go up to the satellite is roughly 60 milliseconds, and the time back is the response back from the satellite to the next station on Earth is another 60 to 70 milliseconds. What that means is that there's literally a 1 to 2 second separation between the time that the signal is sent to the time that it is received back. So imagine we've all been on a phone call. Almost used to happen a lot on Skype, where you would say hello, and 2 seconds later you would get a reply, hello back, or you would get that echo where your own voice would be repeated in your headphones about a second behind what you're saying. It makes communications by voice almost impossible. So if your customer says to you as part of that, what we call our survey process, I have satellite-based internet, we also automatically disqualify the customer from service and suggest that they upgrade to an alternate broadband connection.
Could you repeat the threshold for the values there? Download, upload, and ping?
Sure. So the thresholds are essentially any LAN-based broadband connection with at least 1.5 megabits per second of download.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. So the reason I say 1.5 is because even if they're using an asynchronous DSL connection with 1.5, it means that you're typically looking at 1.5 megabytes download and 768 upload. And that's more than enough to carry on approximately 10 concurrent phone calls. So as you see here, now, when we do our estimations, we actually don't use the actual value for a concurrent phone call as 70 kilobytes per second. But to make it easier, when we do an office visit or when we ask our customers to sort of estimate how much bandwidth they need, we do recommend 100 kilobits per second for each telephone or extension within their office. So it makes the math much more easy to do on a quick basis. So let's assume the customer has 10 users and actually it looks like they haven't updated this page in a while. 10 users at 100 kilobits per second is 100. It's 1,000 kilobits per second, so 1 meg. So a 1 meg connection is actually going to give you 10 users. Now, something to remember when you're doing sort of the pre-qualification and assessing the customer's needs, when you're going to rank a recommendation as to the product and what the requirements are, is to leave enough bandwidth for the other services and the other utilization of their internet. So assuming they have, let's say, a meg of internet, a lot of people forget that they're also using that same shared connection to send internet, to access the internet from a browser, to send and receive email. There are some customers who will call and say, "Why, every day at lunch, my phones, the audio quality starts to become very choppy, and I have my phone calls sound like they're underwater." Well, is it because at lunchtime everybody begins to watch YouTube, right? More often than not, that's exactly what happens, right? We're sort of competing with that same the bandwidth at that time. So remember to keep enough bandwidth there. Now, in terms of the router, you'll notice here our support article does also make recommendations as in terms of what routers you should use. What we've seen and continue to see throughout the U.S. is, and with our limited customers in Latin America, a lot of their offices may be making the transition to voice over IP. They may have a combination modem router that they've gotten from their ISP, or they have a modem which they've then connected to their own router that they've maybe purchased at a local electronics store. And typically, the customer, especially if they're doing it themselves, they're looking to save money. So you may see I don't want to say a cheap modem, but a router, I should say, of inferior quality, right? Everybody, goes to the store, and if given the choice between the $100, the $200, $300, or the $50 router, if you're a small business owner, you'll choose the $50 router probably 80% of the time, right? Is it going to do anything special? Do I really need the Wi-Fi? I'm a small office. I only have 2 or 3 employees. The $50 router should be enough. Well, the reason that router is substantially less expensive than the $100 or $200 or more router is that router does not have enough processing power, and in most cases memory, to be able to handle multiple transactions at once, particularly if the transactions that are going on as it's switching the internet signals that are coming in and out of it to different devices, computers, telephones, security cameras, all of those devices. Those routers will use up that memory and the CPU that's built in very quickly, and that will result in dropped phone calls that are stuck, phone calls that have a stutter. And so the first thing we do is sort of take a look at what those routers are and recommend a list of compatible routers, right? There are several safe options, and we do have a list of them. So what are compatible devices? Apple Airport products, Cisco or Linksys. There are several recommendations. And these are the routers that we see most often in the small business environment. Your Cisco 1100 to 2000 series, right? You'll see that those are all compatibles, and we make recommendations as to how many phones. So, for example, Linksys E1200 series router. It's great for a small office. It has a Wi-Fi connection in the wireless B range, and G, good for 2 to 5 modem phones. Excuse me. A Linksys E3500 series, great. The small business routers, those would be your RV82, the RV16, and the 42 by Linksys. Also compatible. We do recommend them. We do also make recommendations that you make changes to the MTU settings. So adjust them so that the system knows, because they don't auto-sense, this series doesn't auto-sense the type of ISP that you're using, that you make appropriate changes to tell the router, I'm connected to a DSL modem or a cable modem, right? So that it responds to those packet transmissions appropriately. Right, so you'll see most of these. The Linksys are almost all compatible. Your Siemens SpeedStream, which happens to be the 3rd most popular modem router combo in Latin America and in the US, or at least it was till about last year. Those are also lower quality, not the greatest. It's the free modem router combo that the local cable company typically gives away. Those are good for 1 to 3 telephones, but it lacks certain things. So if you need to do a port forwarding, for example, because the customer has a camera, that you'll want to open up certain ports for. Those it will lack, right? Other customers may have things like a dedicated firewall for their network, like the SonicWall here. And in that case, we do, I'm not going to scroll through the entire list. We've got several hundred devices here, but as you can see, as you examine this list, we do make recommendations as to what settings you should make, or the customer should make, to their device, opening certain ports, creating certain timeouts so that the device responds appropriately to our network requests or allows those network requests to be received. All of those should be here in order to allow for the customer to connect their devices appropriately. Now, in terms of, I know a lot of you must have your heads spinning. What other items do we sort of think about when we talk to our customer? Um, a lot of our customers will throw something like quality of service as a question, right? It's particularly if they've been talking to a IT consultant. Um, Ring by name service does not require a quality of service. We do not require you to prioritize voice service any differently than you do your standard data. If the customer wants to sort of create a QoS layer and route their voice traffic differently than their regular internet traffic, they can, but we don't require it. To us, it's data until it's received by our switch. So that we don't require anything special in terms of separating traffic. The other thing that we should consider is the topography, right, of the service. And let me see where that is. I think I've got it hidden in one of these articles. Router compatible, view router compatibility guide. I think it might be that last article. Yeah. So what other considerations do you have to think about when you're recommending the service? Well, one, is there cabling everywhere, right? Again, unless you're using an ATA because you're going to be connecting it to, let's say, a standard phone, wall phone, or to an existing cordless device, or the existing phones in the customer site, they're typically going to be using voice over IP devices, or it will require a voice over IP device to be installed. In that case, does the customer have a Ethernet run? So from the modem to your router, and then to a dedicated Ethernet cable directly to each phone. Now, in this example, you'll see that there is a switch that sort of splits that home run from that port and creates a dedicated connection for the phone and the computer. Most of the voice over IP devices on the market right now will actually have a gigabit switch or a 10100 switch connected to the back of the phone. What does that mean? That means that you can connect directly from the wall or from that router to the phone, and then from the phone out to the computer. So if there's only one dedicated cable going to each workstation, you can hook it up that way. Now, this may work if the customer has a Cat5 going to each computer, but what we've seen in historical buildings, in the new trend here is the sales pits or the open work area where the desks are in the middle of a room and there are no cables other than power cables at the desks. Most of the computers are operating off of the Wi-Fi network. Now, in that case, a cable run to the phone location may not be available, in which case you may want to consider recommending a device that maybe is a cordless device, a cordless phone like a Grandstream VSP600. I'm sorry, a VTech VSP600 or a Yealink W56P. Another option would be to use a desk phone that runs also via the Wi-Fi. You know, something like the Grandstream GXV3240, which is an Android-based device that connects to Wi-Fi. So yet another consideration, right? What does the network topology look like? Are they using multiple routers, right? So sometimes this is not a modem, but the modem that the internet service provider places at the office or at your home typically is a modem slash router. So not only does it give you your connection to the internet, but it has the 4 ports to connect to your computers, and it has Wi-Fi. And then you run out of space for all of the other devices. So rather than using a switch, you've plugged in another router. and that to give you maybe another 4 or 8 connections for your computers. Now, what a lot of people don't realize is that they have inadvertently created what we call double natting. So there is a firewall on the first router that blocks a certain amount of traffic, and that sits behind a second firewall, which also is blocking a certain amount of traffic. Now, the effect is, within the network, everything looks okay, right? Because everything is talking to this router. Now, out to the outside world, once it hits the modem router combination, it changes the IP addresses from an internal to a secondary internal, so one layer removed. And then from here out to the outside world, it changes it again to the public IP address. So what happens typically? One-way audio. The outbound call works fine. They can be heard. The customer can hear them well. And on the return trip, it says, okay, I'm sending the traffic back to 192.168.1.1 or 1.2, which is this connection here to this router. This router interprets it as regular traffic, and then then it tries to send it out to 192.168, let's say 1.23, which is here. This router says, whoa, I don't have a 23. It's incorrect. Don't deliver, right? So the outbound audio works, the inbound audio doesn't, right? That's called double natting, so multiple firewalls. So in that condition, it's also very important for us to ascertain typically what the customer has. Now, it's nice to know in the beginning, if you have access to an IT person that the customer may be using, it's good information to have. Is it absolutely critical? No. Why do I say that? Well, I say that because Ring by Name, we have an entire team. Our activations department is actually dedicated to just this, the process of connecting that customer to our network and doing the configurations. One of the tasks that they perform is actually to ask the customer to provide the information about, okay, starting with the router you received from your cable company or your telephone company, tell me what's connected next. Okay, what piece of equipment is that? Is that a Linksys 3200? Okay, perfect. How many ports does that have? Great. Where does that go? Do you have another switch? What does that look like? What kinds of devices are plugged in behind it? We'll actually do the heavy lifting and figure out and create a map of that customer's network so that we can determine what configuration changes we need to make to that equipment in order for that customer's account to work correctly. Now, some of the other considerations: does the customer have or require power over Ethernet? Sometimes that's a concern. Customer doesn't want multiple cables coming out of the back of the telephone. They just want the one network cable and not the power. Or the customer may have a telephone that wall mounts where there is no power accessible, or like I said, in the middle of a room. So power over Ethernet may be a concern. Does the customer have sufficient ports to power all of their devices? UPSs, the battery backups, right? What happens when that customer doesn't have power, right? For those of you that are not aware, here in Florida, we're preparing for our next hurricane. It looks like we're going to be in the path of a hurricane sometime late this week or early next week over the weekend. And so one of the things that we prepare for here in-house, but we also recommend our customers prepare for, is the loss of power. So let's say the storm comes by and outside a tree falls over and hits one of our power lines and the electricity goes out. Now, at my home, that might be all right because I'll just use my cell phone until the power company comes and turns on my lights again. But at a business location, this might not be acceptable, particularly if the customer is without telephone service for an extended amount of time. Does the customer have a battery backup? Does that battery backup only back up their computer systems, or do they have sufficient sort of space on that UPS to plug in their telephones. So you'll want to make sure that we recommend to that customer that they have the battery backup on their router, battery backup on their modems, battery backup on each telephone, right? So another layer of consideration there. Sure. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. Of the roughly 15 phones that we offer, 14 of them are PoE compatible. So almost everything that we sell, that we provide and we automatically provision is PoE. Mm-hmm. ATAs typically are not PoE. They require the power adapter. And the reason for that is they're actually taking a low voltage signal, the 5 or 12 volts that are coming off of the Ethernet, and then it has to be up converted, not just converted to analog, but then the voltage has to be increased to 96 volts, which is the ring voltage for a telephone. So for those of you that have ever been holding a telephone cable or working on it, while while the phone rings, you'll get quite a shock. So that's the reason that those are not PoE. Okay, so those are some of the sort of considerations that we have for each of the as you go about talking to the customer, thinking about what the requirements are, that would be something to keep in mind. Now, I know that you guys are recording this session on Yammer, but I do recommend taking a look at support.ringbyname.com. You'll see that under our knowledge base articles, we do have information about how to install Ring by Name. We have information about the actual devices themselves, if you're interested in knowing what they look like, what features they have, whether or not they require power, or whether they're PoE. We have the information in both English and Spanish, so you'll see some information here about, for example, ground wire and how to configure those. And it can be accessible, it is accessible via your mobile web browser as well as your computer. Now, excuse me, I just had to clear my throat there. So I've received the emails, your information from Christian. So I have your name, your email, and the country and city that you currently reside in. So as of this afternoon, I should have a test account for each of you on the phone call, which not only will have a login and a password for each of you to start working with, but we're actually going to provision a local number in your market. So that you can start utilizing it. You can start using it for demonstration purposes. The phone calls, they'll be on a World Unlimited plan, so that you'll be able to make calls to local landlines, and you can receive calls at that number locally. So you're not going to be forced to dial into the U.S. You'll be able to dial a local number in your market. So you should have those later today. So they're in the process of finding you the numbers. And let's see if I have an update here. Looks like about half of them are ready. So I know that I've sort of thrown a lot of information at you so far. Is there anything anybody wants any additional clarification on before I move on to the portal? I'm going to skip the demo account for now, only because you guys don't have it. I'm going to move it to the last piece. But before I move to the agent portal, are there any questions?
No, it's clear for me.
Okay. So the agent portal, and let me get this big up on the screen. The agent portal, Ring by Name does have an agent portal, and the website for that is ap.ringbyname.com. I'll show you that in a second. And we're in the process of changing it and adding and changing the materials. It is a portal that we designed a long time ago, and we were using it internally for our own sales staff, but we are in the process of making changes to it so that we have some materials and information that is more useful to you guys in Latin America. So in addition to your logins for the demo accounts, within the next few days, you'll actually also receive a separate agent portal credential, username and password, so that you can log in and take advantage of some of the tools. Now, it's not just for placing orders. The tools that we have here are a number availability checker, so you'll be able to check whether or not we have telephone numbers in inventory for any country, city, and state, basically in the 170 countries that we offer service in. There is a quote and proposal generator, which is working. We just have to make changes to the pricing, because right now we're just using demo pricing for the US. But as we sort of set the pricing for Latin America, we may end up having to have different quote tools for the different regions or different countries. So that is also going to be changing slightly. And what you'll also see on a day-to-day basis change is access to marketing materials. So these would be marketing slicks, product information guides, eventually white papers that you could download and send as PDFs to your customers and prospects, as well as access to training materials and internal documentation and notices.
Sorry, Victor, there is some information regarding success stories in some customers or something like that?
We do have some for U.S. customers. So part of the process of us preparing for this is for us to take some of that information and create sort of the customer success story and translate it to Spanish and have those materials made available through the website to you. Mm-hmm.
Excellent.
And then finally, the piece that everybody wants really is the placing orders and viewing order status. Which is where you'll go once you've received that order from the customer, place the order and actually view the order status to see has that been picked up by our system? Has the system provisioned? Has the system been able to charge the payment method accordingly? Has it been, if any devices are being shipped from the United States or equipment is being shipped, has that been shipped? Is where in the process is it? We do have an automated status tracking system that you'll have access to as well. So let's take a look at that. So this is the Ring by Name agent portal. So you'll see this is ap.ringbyname.com. And this interface is going to change simply because, well, these are placeholder images. But as I said, each one of you will receive a partner username and password. And once you log in, and it takes a moment to verify, what it does is it will actually give you access to a few tools. So the first is the search phone number field. Now, the first is our country phone number availability tool. So for example, if I'm looking for a phone number in Chile, in, let's say, Santiago, the system will automatically tell me that I have 401 numbers available. And if I wanted a particular annex, let's say in the metropolitan region, a number in Valparaiso, I happen to have 32 numbers available in 5632. So 5632, 33, Valparaiso. Maybe I want numbers in Antofagasta. You know, the system is also going to, beyond checking the, it's essentially going to take the number you select, the region you select, and place it at the top, but give you other choices at the bottom. So let's say I didn't find a number in Santiago I wanted. It turns out I actually wanted a number in Iquique. I could actually request that. Let's say, do I have any numbers in Malaysia? Just to check. All right. Let's say Kuala Lumpur. Looks like I have 433 numbers available in Kuala Lumpur at the moment. So again, I would select the region and the exchange, and I could with confidence go back and say to my customer, oh, you need a local number in Malaysia? Sure, I have them. The pricing, as we mentioned last time, is on average about $9 a month. There may be exceptions to one or two. We will update information on here. Some providers, typically it's governmental authorities in some countries, require additional documentation in order to purchase a number. So even though we will provide you with that number at the time of sale, you'll actually receive additional instructions. So if the customer, for example, wanted a number in Malaysia, we'll put it on your account. You can start using it. But Malaysia, their Ministry of Communications actually requires that the account holder provide a passport and a address for a foreign company or individual that has a telephone number, and if it is a local or a national company or resident, they require a copy of the identity document or business license. So typically we'll send you those requirements as to the customer as they order the number. We will also be placing in the training materials section a list of all of the countries and the requirements, as well as the pricing, as an Excel spreadsheet for you guys to look at. Now, you'll see that there is a number porting and an eligibility checker off to the side here. So this is really only for the United States. This tool checks to see whether or not your number can be transferred from another provider to Ring by Name. Right now, this tool only checks numbers inside the US, but the same sheet that gives you the pricing and requirements internationally will have information about whether or not we can transfer telephone numbers. Now, I believe in Latin America, all of the countries that we're operating in, Chile, Peru, Mexico, Argentina, and Brazil, we do have porting and number transfer available in. So generate quotes and proposals. So this is going to change based on the pricing and packaging that we'll have for Latin America. But essentially all this does is you fill out the customer information here. So let's create a quick John Doe, jd@jd.net, 800-555-1212, and he lives at a fancy address in New York City. And he lives in the United States. And he's going to do a 3-year contract. And we can create promo codes for discount levels, but he's going to take one number in the United States. We're going to give him, let's say, one number in Chile for his company number, his main number, and we're going to make that a Santiago number. He's going to get 5 users also in Chile with their own direct numbers. And he needs 3 additional extensions for inside. We do not offer a high-speed service in Chile at the moment, but he's going to take, let's say, where's the 600? He's going to take a wireless phone, the color screen phone. He's going to take 6 of those, and 1 fax line in the United States for his customers. Okay, so I'm going to hit preview here. And what this is really doing is, see this, they're still working on it. So what this does is, let's flip it here. They're in the process of changing it, I'm sure. But what this will do is it will generate a PDF with your name, the customer's information, and all of the pricing. Now, you may already have your own proposal generation tool in HubSpot. And if you do, that's great. But this is meant as something that you can generate from your telephone device, very quickly, or from a browser. So let's go Florida. And we're also going to select the 239. Submit. So it looks like they're in the process of adding the international numbers to that. Invalid product ID. One, 2, 3, 9. Ring by name. It could be. It could be. I know they're still in the process of testing this, but what it'll do is it will generate a cover sheet and a device breakdown and total pricing with a monthly bill on it. Let's try this again. 1, something is marked 0 where it should be 1. Invalid 01 1633. 0 extensions. Quick check. Ah, there it is. I was right. So if I check here, it's going to save, download it, and if I open it, yep, according to the engineers, they're still in the process of adding the international product. But what you'll see here is, based on your login, it's going to enter your name, the customer's information, and then generate a breakdown of their service fees, along with a basic contract. And this is all in the process of being changed, right? So this is a US contract, which won't be, well, we can't use in Latin America, period. But this will change based on the requirements that you guys tell us, right? Oh, we need to bring down, instead of showing them the bundled products, we need to show them the cost of the lines and the cost of the equipment, or the cost of any additionals. This will change as we learn more about the local market. Right. Correct. Correct. You would essentially present this to the customer if they're doing a contract. You would present this to the customer for a signature, and then you would come back to our ordering platform. There's a big button at the top here, new order, and you would simply select the product you're selling. So this would be Ring by Name, and you would start filling out information about that customer, right? So it's all the information you collected. So John Doe, jd@jd.com. All right, we're going to select a unique identifier that we call it the virtual number, which is essentially like the, I guess you can call it in the old terms a circuit ID, and a password. I'm just entering any password, but typically what our sales agents do is they use a random password for each customer. We're going to select your own name from the drop down. Actually, if you're placing, you don't have to select your own name. This is typically for our customer service team to place an order on behalf of someone else so that we can track it and pay commissions. If you're entering your own order, you don't need to select your lead source, or rather your I was way off. This is where you the source for our trafficking. So this is a lead we found on Facebook, right? So the system will automatically check invalid address, right? There's something of the Americas. Yep. So I'm just going to skip that E911 check because it's outside the United States. And here it's the same process. The system is going to based on who you are. So each one of you is actually going to be the Latin America pricing will load automatically. So you need your company number, right? It'll ask you where. So we're going to ask for that number, or let's assume the customer is porting in their number. You'd click keep my number and enter the customer's number, for example. How many users they need? So let's do 5 users. And once again, I'm the master agent, so it does allow me to change the pricing on the cost of the product. But for you guys, once we set the pricing for Latin America, what we will do is provide you with additional discount promo codes. So you can run your own promotions. We'll create them. At the end of the order process, you'll see that there are 2 promotion code areas. So we'll be able to create promo codes based on, let's say, an advertising or a holiday or a particular product that's selling well. We'll be able to sell those and distribute, give you those codes so that you can use those as part of the sales process. And those discount promo codes could be one time. They could be permanent discount. They could be for a percentage or a fixed discount for a certain amount of months. We really have ultimate flexibility as to what those products can do. So once we select the company and the number of users, we actually can look at the additional products they can sell, whether it's a fax or an additional telephone number, additional prepaid long distance credit, which in Latin America is going to be very important, right? We're going to, so at each of these steps, we're going to hit add. And the $9.95 credit and you'll see it populates your order at the bottom. Devices, they're going to take, how many users did I say? I said 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So they're going to go with 5 GXP 2140s and here's the breakdown. All right. So the price per unit, total costs, if you needed to make a change, you know what, that was really 4 and not 5 because the boss doesn't want the same phone as everyone else. He actually wants the color touchscreen phone, and that's the 3240. And you'll see the system will make that change automatically. It will, in this case, we're shipping from the US, but as we work out how the distribution will work with our local partners in Latin America, our local distributors, you'll actually have an option here for shipping. So for right now, I'm just going to select free shipping. Right? If the customer has a shipping address other than that's different than their billing, we can go ahead and edit that. We can apply any combination of the promo codes. So you can enter one promo code external, one internal promo code. And then we move on to the actual payment method, right? So will they be paying by credit card, PayPal? I don't believe we'll be accepting check or money order in Latin America, but we will also be adding, in addition to the Brazilian Boleto Bancario, we will accept Brazilian credit cards. Credit card, this is your international credit card. And once we get, I believe it wasn't Pegu, it was, I can't remember. Right, one of those alternatives. It'll be here in this drop-down list. And so here I'm going to put in PayPal. Right, it's going to say, okay. Now, you'll notice that here, PayPal, it doesn't ask me for the email address. It's going to send the PayPal request to the email address we specified in our account setup. We hit continue. And the system is actually now building this into our ordering platform. So it's going to take all the information we entered. It's going to condense the summary, the type of shipping, the shipping cost, the shipping address, the payment method, the address, any promotions that were applied, give us a summary, and then enter your comments. So for this, you would put in, let's say, any particulars, right? So in this case, so that our finance department doesn't come kill me later on this afternoon. Okay, but typically what we do is anything that the salesperson thinks our onboarding and activations specialist may need to know, right? Customer is only available mornings, Monday through Friday before 10 a.m. Please contact at this cell phone number. Customer is moving and the new office location internet won't be ready until next week or next month. Anything that we in the process of configuring the system and contacting that customer about the order should know, right? Once those have all been entered, you place the order, the system will spin. And right now, what it's doing is it's actually created the order. It's inserted and emailed that person a checkout with PayPal link for payment in the amount of $941.70. Okay. Now, if it was a credit card and it had detected or gotten a rejection for address verification mismatch, so the address of the billing address did not match what was entered, it would tell you rejected for address. Address is not the same, or the bank has responded the address is not correct. If the security code on the back is incorrect, it will tell you a CB2 address or CB2 number incorrect, decline for funds, general decline, right? So that means sometimes the customer has to notify their credit card company or their bank that there's going to be an international transaction. The system will automatically tell you. It'll give you the opportunity to contact that customer and let them know while you're on the phone with them, your card's been declined for this reason, right? Or please contact your bank and let them know that you're expecting an international transaction. Okay. Now, sure. Correct. Now, what happens here as we insert that alternative pay method? You can actually select that as the alternative pay method. The I forget what it was, that really cool website we were looking at. Just like this, it'll generate a link. The customer receives a link, and they enter their own payment information. Right? So we don't even have to worry about that. Now, once you've entered an order, we can actually go to check orders, and you'll see order ID for John Doe was created at 3:09 p.m. The status is ordered, right? We can view, and then we can actually track it. So right now, I know it's stuck in provisioning and hasn't been approved by finance because there hasn't been a customer ID or an account number assigned. Once this has been approved by the finance department and verified as a genuine order, it will say it'll change from ordered to provisioning, right? Which means our automated platform is actually in the process of creating the instance, adding all of the services and packages onto the account, and then once it gets completed, right? The system builds that customer's account. You'll actually see the new customer ID appear, and the status will say one of two things: either shipping, meaning it's completed, but it's waiting for the devices to be assigned, right? And that's the part of the process where we actually match the MAC addresses to the individual account, so that when the devices arrive from our distributor, they are already pre-programmed automatically. Actually, they're not pre-programmed. They're just attached to our system so that when they get plugged in for the first time, they automatically configure. Or in the case of a customer who has their own equipment, it will just say completed. And in that case, we actually have a customer that can go into their Ring by Name account or with the help of our activations department, they can actually go in and for each user, pull out the device settings, right? And manually provision that equipment, right? Using the username and authorization and that good stuff. Okay. Now, obviously, the easiest way to do this is to use our automatic provisioning system, right? And that works when we've actually placed the order for devices through our ordering platform, right? What happens at that point is the system will create a placeholder for the MAC address next to each one of the users that we've ordered for the account. And as we take the devices, either locally here that we're shipping, or the MAC addresses for the devices that have been emailed or sent to us via an automated process from the distributor, we will actually take the individual MAC addresses and attach them to every user on the account. And what that does on our side is it creates an automatic configuration file. So every one of the phone brands that we support has what we call zero configuration enabled. And what that is the first time and every time the phone reboots or renews its IP address at night, typically at midnight, depending on how the lease on the customer's IP address is determined from their router. Every time it re-registers and looks for a new IP address, it will send out an automatic notification to the servers at the manufacturer and say, "Hi, I'm MAC address 12345. Who do I belong to?" Well, the phone announces its ID. The manufacturer uses that ID and checks it against a database of assigned MAC addresses. And when they find that attached to Ring by Name, they actually redirect that phone to our provisioning server. Our provisioning server receives that request and says, again, makes a query. "Hello, device. Who are you?" The device says, "I'm serial number or MAC address 12345. And then our platform responds with, "Great, here's your configuration." And in that configuration, we upload the user setting, the extension number, the authorization name, the password, the local time zone, the screen settings, and any firmware that needs to be updated. So in a sense, that device is updated every time that IP address is renewed. So every day, essentially, at least once every 24 hours. Does that make sense so far? Not too much to remember?
Not.
Okay. So I guess the one piece of hardware that or the way that hardware is sort of provisioned, regardless of whether it's an ATA or a device, is essentially the same. So here I'm just going to log into a phone that's in my office. And you'll see this is the video phone. And you'll see here, mine is a little different in that I have multiple accounts registered for different purposes. I've got different accounts that I test. But essentially, under advanced settings, I believe, or maintenance, upgrade, here we go. So this is the address of the manufacturer, right? This is the configuration server at Grandstream. So every phone that comes out of the factory, regardless of who makes it, has one of these settings in it. So every time the phone reboots, every time it's connected to power, it goes and it finds its way home and announces itself to this server back at the manufacturer. The manufacturer requests that it announces its MAC address, right? Its part number, its firmware version, and its MAC address, right? Based on those three pieces of information, it goes against a master list that's maintained by both the manufacturer and the distributors. And it says, "Hi, this is phone model 3240, ending in 3 Echo 35. Who do I belong to?" And that automatically forwards it to Ring by Name. And Ring by Name comes in and automatically updates these fields here. So we'll actually change the account name. So that's the label on the button. We'll change the SIP server ID. We change the authorization and the username. We'll update the password. We'll even update the code that is associated with the mail button, the voicemail button on the phone. And we'll update it with the username that is configured in the platform, as well as different settings for network and SIP settings, all of the little settings that we need for it to communicate appropriately with our system. Right? And once that's done, and we verified that not only are the correct settings on the phone, but it has the correct firmware version, we'll actually reboot it. And once it reboots, it'll come up as registered. Right? So right now, like I said, there are about 17 different products, voice over IP products that we are compatible with, that we provision. And all we do is in our ordering platform. Once you place that order, we mate that account with the MAC addresses on it, and then the equipment self configures. Okay. Your test accounts, later on today, as I said, you'll be receiving your test accounts. You'll get instructions on how to log in at well, strangely enough, login.ringbyname.com. And you'll be able to explore. If you do have your own equipment that you'd like to program, let me know what versions you are, and if we don't already have a slick on how to support it, I'd be more than glad to have one of our techs contact you and help you configure that equipment so you have a test line on one of your devices that you can use. Like I said, play around with the system. There's nothing that you can break. There is nothing that you can do to permanently damage or stop the operation. The worst that you can do is have the phone ring in the wrong place. So don't be afraid to explore and to really get in there and play with it. It's like not like a traditional phone system. There's no way to quote unquote break it. So, and if you have any questions, feel free to contact me. Contact us directly through our support page. So whatever you don't find the instructions to or the information on our support page, I encourage you to hit the button that says Contact Support. Ask us a general question. You have the ability to attach a screenshot directly from your computer to show us what you're experiencing or what is not working in your configuration, or if you don't understand anything. So if I type, I don't know what I'm doing, and I attach a screenshot. Okay. Hit next. The first thing it's going to do is, based on your description of the problem, it's going to try to offer you some solutions. I don't know what I'm doing, so do you need to reset your password? Are you trying to use it with Office 365, which for some reason our system thinks is the hardest thing to do? Are you trying to greet your customers by name, or can we offer you some training, right? If you find an answer to your question, great. If you don't, skip and just give us your information. Where can we contact you by email? What is your telephone number that's assigned to you? When's the best time to contact you? Right? Is it as soon as possible? Is it tomorrow in the morning, today, tonight? Where can we contact you, via cell phone or via email? How do you want us to contact you? And once you send that message, it's actually going to open up a support ticket. Don't be shy. Please open up support tickets for any questions that you may have. If not just to understand how the support system works, it's a great experience to see how our technicians will be able to support your customers locally, right? I think it's very important that you know that when you open a support ticket for your customers in Latin America, they're going to be answered in Spanish. That the type of language is language that is not too sort of gringo, that your customer has no idea what we're saying. It's a good experience to do anyway. I've been known to open up support tickets just to see how the guys are performing. So I do encourage you to do so.
Portuguese as well?
Can you repeat that?
In Portuguese as well?
Absolutely.
Sure.
Absolutely.
I have a question regarding to the requirements for the implementation in the end of the customer. Is there a need of fixed IP or dynamic is enough?
Dynamic is enough.
Okay.
Because the phones, we use network address transversal, is the technical term. So we actually send a keep alive message every 30 minutes.
Okay, perfect.
Great question.
Thank you. Christian, just an idea. I think that we must have some time to study those materials and come up with some doubt. Maybe it's better you put some time for it. I think you'll be more. Okay. Perfect. Okay. Thanks. Okay, thanks.
Absolutely. Sure. Absolutely. That's
Okay.
exactly what we want to do.
No, there is a lot of information that probably we have to go through again and start to read more carefully. But it's very clear, and the system is very easy in order to handle. So it's very good for us.
That's true.
Okay. Gracias.
Thank you, everyone.
Chao, chao.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.